We will be discussing in this session three things: what macroeconomics is all about, why we should be studying macroeconomics, and how we plan to proceed in this course. Let us take the first issue: what macroeconomics is all about. You would be able to appreciate what macroeconomics is if I take you back to the microeconomics course. And if you recall, what you did in microeconomics is to study the behavior of a utility maximizing consumer or a profit maximizing producer. You would have studied the market power under alternate market structures like profit competition, monopolistic competition. Now, the short point is that in microeconomics you studied the behavior of the individual economic entity. Now, as opposed to studying individual economic entities, in macroeconomics, we will be dealing with economic aggregates. Now, what economic aggregates are? Economic aggregates are abstractions used to describe some features, some salient features of the economy. Now, to appreciate this way of defining economic aggregates, let me take some examples. Let us consider the oft-used macroeconomic indicators like GDP, inflation, interest rate, exchange rate. Let us start with GDP. Now, in microeconomics, we studied the factors influencing maybe the income of an individual. But in macroeconomics, we will be studying how the total income of everybody in the economy can be increased. Now, that is like you are moving from individual of one person's or a one consumer's utility maximization to a nation's utility maximization. Now, of course, it need not be always one need not always find a one-to-one correspondence that an increase in GDP is associated with an increase in welfare. But taking that limited view for the time being, now what we are saying is in microeconomics we studied the spending pattern of a individual, but in macroeconomics we will be studying the spending pattern of all individuals, and not only all individuals but also of firms, of governments, of say foreigners spending on our goods, and of course our spending on foreigners goods. Now, taking all together, we get the GDP. Now, if somebody says that I want to see a firm's output, you can very well go to the firm's plant or to its warehouse where you can see the produced good. But if suppose somebody says that I want to see all that is produced in an economy, now is it possible to visualize or to observe all the goods that is produced at one place? It is simply not possible. Similarly is the scenario uh, with regard to the inflation measurement, or the way inflation is conceptualized. What inflation is measuring? It is measuring how the average price level is changing over a period of time. Now, average price level, is it possible to observe average price level? Of course, it is not. Now, similarly is the case with exchange rate. Now, exchange rate is decided by the demand for and supply of one currency vis-a-vis the other. Now, what happens? Different traders are giving quotes, and the computer is processing all those different quotes to give you a final outcome where the demand for and supply of currency match, and that gives us the exchange rate. Now, is it possible to observe the exchange rate? We can't see the exchange rate, but we get to know that this is the exchange rate. Now, in that sense, these are abstract notions because we cannot see them for we cannot observe them, but nonetheless they have implication for us, because take the example of inflation. Now, when inflation is rising, it is linked the dearness allowance of government employees are linked to a particular measure of inflation. Now inflation, I may not be able to see the inflation number anywhere except the financial newspapers, because I can see the prices of individual commodities when I go to a supermarket, but I cannot see the average price level anywhere because it is computed from the individual prices. In that sense, the average price level or the inflation is an abstract notion, but but at the same time, though it may be abstract, but it has got implication for many, especially for government employees, because their dearness allowance is linked to the inflation number. Similarly, the exchange rate, what happens to the exchange rate can also have implications for foreign direct investments or FII investments coming into the economy. So we may not be able to see them, but these numbers which are generated from a host of interactions and apply using certain methodologies to, because GDP, we use a host of methodologies to estimate, so we cannot see the GDP at one place, but nonetheless the GDP number has got significant implication for all of us. So what part of macroeconomics essentially boils down to studying economic aggregates, and economic aggregates are abstractions which are used to describe some salient features of the economy. Next, we would be discussing the why part of it, why we should be studying macroeconomics, and also we will be discussing some fundamentals related to understanding of the macroeconomy. Broadly, we would talk about two things: the distinction between endogenous and exogenous variables, and also the distinction between stock and flow. Please be very clear about these fundamentals, because we will be using them on and off throughout this course.